Welcome back to True Echo, the channel where powerful, real-life inspired stories of injustice, redemption, and poetic justice come alive. Today's story follows one woman's silent strength and shocking revenge, not with violence or rage, but with calculated consequences that left an entire corporation in ruins. What happens when a billion-dollar CEO is mistaken for a delivery worker, and humiliated publicly? Stay with us. Because what she does next will leave you breathless. Monday morning dawned with its usual rhythm, New York's skyline glowing gold against the early sun, the buzz of city ambition humming through the streets. Inside the glittering glass tower of Brightwell Enterprises, one of the country's most powerful cybersecurity firms, polished leather shoes clicked against marble floors. The scent of espresso and expensive perfume drifted through the air as professionals, poised and self-assured, filed into the lobby like clockwork. Among them walked a woman who didn't match the others, at least not in the eyes of the people at the front desk. Her outfit was refined but understated, black slacks, a soft gray cashmere sweater, flat shoes. She carried no designer bag, wore no flashy watch, and sported no noticeable makeup. But in her calm eyes and composed bearing was the unmistakable aura of command. Her name was Olivia Harris, CEO and founder of Harris Innovations, a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity empire. And today, she had chosen to visit Brightwell Enterprises in person, unannounced, to observe the culture before signing a monumental partnership deal. No cameras. No entourage. Just her, alone. The way she preferred to gauge people, unfiltered and honest. She stepped through the sliding doors into the expansive marble-floored lobby, where sunlight poured through 20-foot-tall windows and glimmered off polished brass. Her gaze flicked across the room, security stationed near the front, guests seated in plush lounge chairs, and behind a white stone desk stood a young blonde receptionist, fingers tapping across her phone. Olivia approached with a polite smile. Rachel Bennett glanced up briefly, her perfectly curled hair bouncing as she tossed it over her shoulder. Her icy blue eyes made a quick judgment, brown skin, no heels, plain sweater. Her lips curled slightly. Delivery staff. Personal assistant. Deliveries go around back, she said without looking up again, her voice flat, dismissive. I'm not here for a delivery, Olivia said, still smiling gently. I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Mr. Richard Lawson. Rachel scoffed audibly. There's no appointment. Please leave before I call security. She hadn't even checked the system. Olivia's name, her full name, was printed right at the top of the 9 a.m. executive schedule. But Rachel didn't look. She didn't care. And the security guard, seeing the tense exchange, walked over without hesitation. Ma'am, I need you to step away from the desk, he said, already reaching for his radio. A few employees nearby paused in their steps. Whispers began. One woman stifled a laugh. The entire lobby held its breath, drawn in by the scene unfolding. Olivia didn't flinch. She looked at Rachel calmly. I assure you, I'm expected. Rachel leaned in, her voice dripping with disdain. This isn't a charity. You want to play CEO, do it somewhere else. That's when Jonathan Reed stepped out of the elevator. As executive vice president, Jonathan knew exactly who Olivia Harris was, and he saw her instantly. Their eyes locked for a single, fleeting moment. He said nothing. Instead, he gave Rachel the smallest nod. Just enough. Rachel straightened, confidence swelling. And the guards acted. Olivia's phone slipped from her hand and cracked on the floor as they twisted her arms behind her. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. But her eyes, sharp, still, devastating, captured everything. The humiliation wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Jonathan. Silent. Calculating. A man who knew the truth but chose the comfort of complicity. Rachel's whisper came cold and cruel, next time you want to pretend you're rich, dress the part. The lobby laughed again. Outside, as the guards let her go and the glass doors shut behind her, Olivia picked up her fallen phone. The screen was nicked. She brushed her sleeve, composed herself, and walked a few feet away. Then she made a single call. "Activate Plan B," she said quietly. "Pull everything. All investments. Cancel every contract. Effective immediately." "Are you sure?" her assistant asked, shocked. "I'm done being quiet," Olivia replied. "Let them feel what silent complicity costs." Brightwell Enterprises would never see the next morning the same way again. Inside Brightwell's towering headquarters, the atmosphere remained oddly festive for a Monday. Rachel Bennett, still glowing with satisfaction, basked in the compliments floating her way. "That was wild," someone whispered as they passed the reception desk. "She really thought she had a meeting with the CEO." Rachel tossed her golden hair back and let out a light laugh. "You should have seen her face. These people really think they can walk into our space and demand things." But she didn't notice how one intern standing near the elevator shifted uncomfortably at her words, nor did she see the fleeting look of concern that flickered across the face of a junior analyst watching from the cafe upstairs. Rachel had no idea that in those 5 minutes after Olivia left the building, the foundation of Brightwell Enterprises had already begun to rot. Across town, inside the sleek high-rise headquarters of Harris Innovations, Olivia's executive team had mobilized. Her assistant, Marla, stood at the center of the war room with a tablet displaying charts, projections, and contracts. All Brightwell partnerships are in termination status. Investor alerts prepared. Press statement, final draft complete, just waiting for your approval. Olivia nodded, her tone calm but final. "Send it now. Make it public. Let's not play games." Within minutes, the headlines began lighting up across news networks and financial dashboards like a string of firecrackers. Breaking: Harris Innovations cancels all Brightwell contracts citing racial discrimination. Olivia Harris publicly shames Brightwell for corporate prejudice culture. Stock plummets after public fallout between tech giants. At Brightwell, phones began ringing. Notifications buzzed uncontrollably on staff desktops. Analysts stared wide-eyed at the news ticker. Upstairs in the executive suite, Jonathan Reed stood in front of a towering window, gripping his coffee cup like a lifeline. When his assistant burst into the room, he already knew. "Sir," she said, voice trembling. "Harris Innovations just released a public statement, name-dropping Rachel, and you." Jonathan's face paled. "Me? They mentioned your silence. That you saw everything and didn't intervene." Jonathan's hand trembled, and the cup slipped slightly in his grasp, scalding coffee spilling onto his wrist. But he didn't even flinch. His mind was already elsewhere, running through stockholders, legal liabilities, and the media storm that would come crashing down before lunch. Meanwhile, Richard Lawson, the CEO of Brightwell Enterprises, was still unaware of the full gravity of the storm. He was in a morning briefing, outlining their upcoming global security proposal, when the first alert came in. His assistant handed him a tablet, face ghost white. "Sir, you need to read this." Richard read the press release twice, his chest tightening with each line. Olivia Harris, CEO of Harris Innovations, experienced a public racial incident in Brightwell's lobby this morning. "Our firm cannot partner with a company where dignity, equity, and basic respect are absent." He stood, walked to the window, and clenched his jaw. "Get Rachel in here. Now," he growled. But Rachel never made it upstairs. Down in the lobby, her phone had started buzzing non-stop. Notifications from Brightwell's internal news thread, public feeds, and finally, a call from HR. "Rachel Bennett, report to Human Resources immediately." Confused, she rose from her seat, the color draining from her face as she read the headlines on her phone. She clicked the viral video link showing surveillance footage. The moment Olivia was grabbed by security, Rachel's smug face clear as day, audio capturing her exact words. The internet had already exploded. Deliveries go around back. Pretend you're rich. The comment sections were a tsunami of outrage. Influencers, reporters, and civil rights attorneys were tagging Olivia Harris with praise and tagging Brightwell with fury. Rachel barely made it 3 steps toward the elevator when Richard stormed out, eyes wild with panic. "Where is she?" he barked, scanning the lobby. "Where's Rachel Bennett?" Their eyes met, and Rachel froze. Around her, Brightwell employees had stopped in their tracks, watching in stunned silence. Richard pointed a trembling finger. "You just lost us everything." Rachel blinked, the weight of his words not yet settling. "That was Olivia Harris," he continued, voice growing louder, angrier. "She was here for a meeting to finalize a $200 million cybersecurity contract. Do you understand what you've done?" Rachel shook her head. I didn't know. I didn't think she was." "You didn't think," Richard snapped. "You judged. You insulted. And now, we're done." The silence in the lobby was thunderous. No one looked away. Rachel, pale and shaken, tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Richard turned to the security guards. "And you two grabbed her without asking questions? Do you think we can afford that kind of mistake?" The guards lowered their heads, shame burning on their faces. One quietly stepped back, already pulling out his badge. And then, Jonathan appeared. "Richard," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Richard's gaze darkened. "You saw it all, didn't you?" Jonathan hesitated. The pause was damning. "You knew who she was and stood there. You let it happen. I thought it best not to interfere. To keep the peace." Richard stared at him in disbelief. "Jonathan, she was our largest private partner. Your silence just cost us the company." And then, as if fate had timed it, someone yelled across the floor, the stocks crashing. 40% drop in 10 minutes. Panic erupted. Analysts ran. Assistants screamed into phones. The large display board above the lobby shifted to red across every line. Brightwell was bleeding, and fast. And outside, just beyond the glass, Olivia Harris stood watching, her face calm. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't celebrating. She simply watched, a silent force of justice, as her actions turned into a tidal wave. She had come to offer partnership. Instead, Brightwell offered her contempt. And now, she would show them what dignity backed by power truly looked like. The chaos unfolding inside Brightwell Enterprises was the kind of unraveling that corporate executives feared in nightmares. Red stock tickers bled across every trading floor. Analysts watched as shareholder confidence imploded in real time. News stations had already dispatched camera crews to the building. And yet, at the center of it all stood Olivia Harris, calm, collected, and utterly resolute. Inside, Richard Lawson struggled to regain a shred of control. He slammed the conference room door shut behind him, seething with fury. A dozen executives sat around the gleaming table, each one frozen as he paced. She was coming here to sign, Richard snapped. Olivia Harris was going to sign the final agreement for cybersecurity support on our government defense contract. Do you know what that means? Not one executive dared to respond. Most of them were already checking their phones, watching live updates as major clients followed Harris Innovations' lead and began severing ties. I want an immediate public apology drafted, Richard ordered. We'll take full responsibility. I don't care what it takes. Call her. Meet her. Beg if you have to. His words hung in the air. Everyone knew it was too late. Down in the HR department, Rachel Bennett sat like a ghost, shoulders slumped, eyes vacant, lips trembling as she stared at the termination letter in her lap. The woman who had basked in attention just an hour ago now found herself abandoned, disposable, and widely hated. You need to understand, the HR director said coolly, this isn't just a PR disaster. You were the face of a racially charged incident that was broadcast globally. There is no scenario in which we keep you here. I didn't know who she was, Rachel whispered. The HR director raised an eyebrow. That's the problem. Rachel's voice cracked, desperate. It was a misunderstanding. People say worse things all the time. Perhaps, the HR woman replied sharply. But those people didn't humiliate a black female billionaire who holds their company's future in her hands. You did. The words hit harder than any slap. Rachel signed the letter with trembling hands. As she left HR, the hallways that once felt like her runway now swallowed her whole. Everyone looked away. No more admiring glances. No friendly greetings. Just cold stares and awkward silences. Rachel passed by the lobby one last time, and saw the elevator doors open. Out stepped Richard Lawson again, only this time his face looked hollow. In his hand, he held a copy of the official termination statement from Harris Innovations. It wasn't just a business announcement. It was a death sentence. We hereby terminate all negotiations, funding, and security contracts with Brightwell Enterprises, effective immediately, the letter read. We stand against prejudice in all forms, subtle or systemic. Richard could hardly speak as he stood before the remaining staff. You think this morning was about one receptionist, he said bitterly. You think this is just about Rachel? Everyone stiffened. This is about a culture we allowed. We smiled when things were said behind closed doors. We let people make judgments based on appearances. We chose silence. His voice cracked slightly. And now we'll all pay. On the trading floor, Brightwell's valuation dropped another 10% in just 7 minutes. Journalists were broadcasting live from the steps outside. Shareholders had called an emergency board meeting. In her office across town, Olivia Harris watched the broadcast silently. A young intern at Harris Innovations entered the room with a mug of tea and a worried look. Miss Harris, she asked gently. Do you want to respond to the apology statement? Olivia didn't turn from the screen. No, she said simply. We already responded, with action. The intern nodded and started to leave, but Olivia stopped her. Do you know why I walked into Brightwell alone today? The girl hesitated. To see the culture. Yes. I've sat across too many polished executives who smile in meetings and sneer behind closed doors. I needed to feel it, unfiltered. And now I've felt it. She finally turned to face the young woman. And I want people like you to never feel that. The intern's eyes welled with tears. She'd heard the stories. She'd seen the footage. But it wasn't until this moment that she truly understood the depth of what Olivia stood for. Back at Brightwell, the company's legal team was scrambling. Lawsuits were expected. Compliance investigations loomed. Employees from marginalized backgrounds were already considering class action cases. But the most devastating blow came at 2:47 p.m. A simple notification flashed across every employee's screen. Security notice: this building has been placed under financial lockdown. All transactions suspended. Then came the email from the board. Effective immediately, Brightwell Enterprises is entering liquidation review. All non-essential staff are advised to prepare for transition. The company was collapsing. And outside, under the same morning sunlight, Olivia Harris stood once again, this time not in silence. She gave a short, impromptu statement to reporters gathered outside. I came here hoping to build a bridge between two great companies. But what I encountered was the same old wall, built of prejudice, guarded by silence, and decorated with fake professionalism. I don't believe in revenge. I believe in consequences. The crowd fell silent. And I will always choose justice over convenience. That line would echo across social media for days. Rachel Bennett, watching from her phone at a nearby bus stop, felt something inside her twist violently. Her face was already all over the internet. She couldn't go home without fear of being recognized. Her career was over. But worse than that, her arrogance had become immortalized, as a warning. The receptionist who mocked a billionaire, then watched her entire company crumble because of it. And the story was far from over. By Tuesday morning, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and even BBC World News had picked up the story. Brightwell collapse, from empire to ashes in 24 hours. Olivia Harris, the woman who brought down $1 billion company with a phone call. Corporate America's wake-up call: what happens when you disrespect the wrong CEO? Inside Harris Innovations, Olivia sat in her private office, a minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight flooding the room with warmth. But her mind wasn't on victory. Her thoughts drifted to the younger Olivia. The intern once dismissed for being too quiet. The woman who had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. What had happened at Brightwell was a storm long in the making. She had seen its roots before, coded in politeness, hidden behind closed-door jokes, sealed in unofficial policies. This time, she didn't walk away. She made sure the storm uprooted everything. Her assistant, Marla, entered without knocking. We've received over 300 letters from young women across the country. Black professionals, first-generation entrepreneurs, students. They're calling you a symbol. Olivia didn't smile. I'm not a symbol, she replied quietly. I'm just someone who finally had the power to say, enough. Meanwhile, Brightwell's boardroom had transformed into a war zone. Richard Lawson sat at the head of the table, unshaven and visibly aged overnight. His bespoke suit now hung loose, like a borrowed uniform for a job that no longer fit. Across from him, the board's chairman pounded the table. You were warned about the optics. You knew Olivia Harris was visiting and you let her walk through the front doors unannounced. Richard's voice was hoarse. I wanted to see how our team treated guests without a name tag. Without prep. I thought we'd impress her with real culture. Well, you did, the chairman spat. You showed her exactly who we are. At that moment, a junior analyst burst into the room. Sir, another investor just pulled. Avalon Group. They've pulled all $80 million in capital. The room fell silent. Brightwell wasn't just hemorrhaging. It was flatlining. Across the city, Jonathan Reed sat in his private home, curtains drawn. He hadn't returned to work since being suspended pending internal review. His world, once constructed so carefully with silent influence, firm handshakes, and strategic nods, was imploding. He replayed the moment in the lobby over and over. The calm on Olivia's face. The recognition in her eyes. The second she realized he knew her and said nothing. And worst of all, the brief flicker of betrayal that passed between them. No email he sent now would fix it. No call would undo the silence. His phone buzzed again. Another legal notice. His name had been included in Olivia's official deposition detailing the cultural rot inside Brightwell. Outside the now crumbling skyscraper, protesters had begun to gather. College students held up signs. We could be Olivia. Dismiss US, we destroy you. Racism isn't bad for PR. It's bad for business. The pressure was unbearable. Meanwhile, Olivia stood before her team in the Harris Innovations auditorium. I didn't plan to become a story, she began, voice even. But I want to remind everyone here, success without dignity is failure in disguise. And silence, especially in power, is betrayal. Her team erupted into applause. Later that evening, as news drones hovered over Brightwell's headquarters, a new announcement shattered the last shred of hope. Brightwell Enterprises files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That same night, Rachel Bennett sat alone in a laundromat on the Lower East Side, hoodie pulled over her head. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her as she scrolled through dozens of videos of herself, captioned with disgust and mockery. She read the comments, tears in her eyes. Typical racist Karen energy. She really thought she could talk like that and get away with it. Where's she working now? Chick-fil-A drive-thru? She tried to call her sister. No answer. She checked LinkedIn. Her account had been flagged for harassment. She searched job openings, but knew in her gut no company wanted her face on their brand. Meanwhile, Olivia received a message from the White House's Diversity Task Force, inviting her to join a panel on corporate culture reform. She accepted. Not for the attention, but to make sure this wasn't just a moment. It would become a movement. As dawn broke over New York the next morning, the once bustling entrance to Brightwell was covered in paper signs, caution tape, and reporters camped out like mourners at a funeral. And Olivia? She stood in a quiet construction site just a few blocks away, wearing a hard hat. Her new project was about to break ground, the Harris Innovation Center for Ethical Technology. Where Brightwell once stood as a monument to cold power, her center would rise, a home for bold ideas from overlooked voices. She handed the blueprint to her architect and smiled. They told me I didn't belong in their building. So I built my own. 5 days after Brightwell Enterprises officially filed for bankruptcy, New York's skyline bore silent witness to a corporate empire's fall, and the quiet rise of something new. In Midtown, the building that once buzzed with board meetings and high-stakes deals was now barricaded, with security staff posted only to keep journalists out. Reporters stood in clusters outside, doing live segments about the company's dramatic collapse, their voices echoing the same theme. How arrogance, racism, and silence cost a billion-dollar company everything. But across town, Olivia Harris stood inside a completely different kind of space. Her new innovation center was coming together faster than expected. The old Brightwell boardroom table, acquired at the bankruptcy auction, was being repurposed. Not as a shrine to ego, but as a collaborative desk for underrepresented tech entrepreneurs. Keep the scuffs on it, Olivia told the carpenters, running her fingers along the polished mahogany. Let people see what it used to be. Let it remind them that power, when misused, always comes with scars. The carpenter blinked. You sure, Miss Harris? She nodded. Very. Meanwhile, inside what was left of Brightwell's operations office, Richard Lawson paced like a man trying to stop an avalanche with his bare hands. He'd been fighting to sell off Brightwell's remaining assets, code, IP, servers, to any firm that would take them. But the brand had become toxic. Emails came in fast and cold. Declined. We cannot align with your corporate history. Brand risk too high. Revisit in 2 years. Due to the public nature of your discrimination incident, we must sever all connections. Richard slumped into a chair. He'd spent 27 years building Brightwell. Now, he couldn't even sell its scrap. He looked out the window. A street artist across the avenue was spray painting a mural. The word stung. When justice is silent, destruction is loud. He closed the blinds. At the same time, Jonathan Reed sat in a legal deposition room, gray walls, metal chairs, a single glass of water before him. The attorney across the table didn't need to raise her voice. Her questions were calm, surgical. You were in the lobby when Ms. Harris was detained? Yes. You knew who she was? Yes. And you did not intervene because? Jonathan's silence stretched. I didn't think it was my place. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. You were the vice president. What was your place, then? He had no answer. His silence in that moment had not just destroyed a deal, it had destroyed his credibility. In the business world, perception was power, and now he was perceived as a coward. A man who stood by while injustice unfolded feet away. Jonathan's lawyer leaned in. There's a chance they'll recommend permanent disbarment from any executive board positions in the tech industry. Jonathan closed his eyes. He'd always thought of himself as above reproach. Always knew the right handshake, the quiet deal, the smirk that meant, I control the room. But none of those mattered anymore, His silence had been louder than a slap, and now it echoed through every hallway he once walked with pride. Back at Harris Innovations, Olivia's team finalized the media invite list for the center's grand opening. Olivia didn't just want a celebration. She wanted accountability. Invite Brightwell's former interns, she told Marla. All of them. The ones they let go during budget cuts. The ones with real ideas. Marla nodded. And Rachel Bennett? Olivia paused for the first time. No, she said softly. Some lessons don't come with a second invitation. At that very moment, Rachel was sitting in a crowded waiting room at a staffing agency in Brooklyn. The place smelled like cheap coffee and stress. Her once flawless nails were chipped. Her hair hung limp. Her phone had been silent for days. When they finally called her name, the recruiter glanced at her resume. Receptionist at Brightwell Enterprises, he asked, squinting. Rachel sat straighter, trying to fake some trace of pride. Yes. The recruiter didn't even blink. Sorry. We've had companies request we not refer former Brightwell employees right now. Not after the Harris incident. Too much risk. Rachel's face fell. You may want to leave that off your next resume, the recruiter added, almost kindly. As she walked back to the subway in silence, she passed a digital billboard flashing Olivia's image. Building the Future, the Harris Innovation Center launches this Friday. Beneath it, a quote. We don't tear down doors. We build new buildings. Rachel turned away, ashamed. But deep down, she knew the billboard wasn't gloating. It was a mirror. And she didn't like what she saw. Back in the city's center, Olivia stood before the massive glass wall of her new center's lobby. Workers were finishing the signage above the entryway, welcome innovators. All backgrounds. All voices. A young black girl in a hoodie walked by, staring through the glass. Olivia noticed. Stepped outside. Would you like to come in? She asked gently. The girl blinked. I don't belong here. Olivia smiled. Neither did I. Once. She held the door open. And that, more than anything else, was the moment Olivia had been working toward. Not revenge. Not retribution. Redemption, for others. The grand opening of the Harris Innovation Center was scheduled for Friday morning, and by Thursday night, the streets around the building were already buzzing with anticipation. The city's most influential leaders, news anchors, tech investors, and advocacy groups were all planning to attend. But the guest list wasn't filled with the usual power players alone. Olivia had made a bold decision. Half the invitations were reserved for young, overlooked talents, first-generation college students, local coders, high school inventors from underfunded schools. She wanted this center to be more than a gleaming tower. It had to be a declaration. That night, in the stillness of her office, Olivia stood before the tall windows overlooking the city that once tried to shove her into the shadows. She held in her hands an old photo, her first year as a cybersecurity consultant, fresh out of grad school, the only black woman in a department of 40. She remembered being passed over, doubted, talked over. And she remembered promising herself, if I ever get the power to change things, I won't forget. That promise had brought her here. The next morning arrived with crisp sunlight and a steady stream of press vehicles pulling up to the curb. The red carpet outside the Harris Innovation Center wasn't velvet, it was vibrant orange and teal, Olivia's signature colors representing fire and healing. Inside, guests were greeted by holograms explaining the story behind the building. This space exists because silence hurts more than words. Because equity isn't charity, it's strategy. And because the future deserves everyone's voice. Meanwhile, across the city, Jonathan Reed sat in his apartment, unshaven, watching the coverage live. His name had become a cautionary tale in business schools. The man who stayed silent. His phone hadn't rung in days. His inbox remained empty, except for spam and one anonymous email titled simply, "This could have been avoided." He didn't open it. He didn't need to. At the Harris Center, the ceremony had begun. Olivia stood behind the podium dressed in a striking black and white suit, symbolizing clarity, contrast, and unity. She faced a crowd of more than 300 guests, plus thousands watching online. "My name is Olivia Harris," she began, voice steady and sure. "And 1 month ago, I was escorted out of a building for not looking the part." The crowd stirred. "And that building no longer exists." Laughter, nervous, knowing, spread through the audience. "But I didn't build this place to gloat," she continued. "I built it so no girl, no young entrepreneur, no first-time coder, ever has to wait for permission to be seen. Here, your value isn't based on what you wear, what you look like, or where you came from." Applause erupted. In the very back of the room stood a familiar face, her former intern, Darius, now a rising tech leader in his own right. He grinned, proud. And beside him was someone no one expected. Rachel Bennett. Hair tied back simply, no makeup, no flash. She wasn't invited. She had come alone, quietly, just to listen. She didn't expect forgiveness. She didn't deserve redemption. But she needed to understand the magnitude of what she had destroyed, and what had risen in its place. As Olivia closed her speech with a powerful quote, "Respect is not optional. It's foundational." Rachel felt tears sting her eyes. Her chest tightened with regret so thick, it was hard to breathe. Outside, the media swarmed Olivia as she exited the center. "What do you want companies to learn from the fall of Brightwell?" one reporter asked. Olivia paused, her eyes scanning the skyline. "That silence isn't neutral," she said. "And that every single person, at the front desk or the boardroom, shapes a company's legacy." That quote would be printed on every major paper the next day. That evening, back at her apartment, Rachel sat alone, jobless, still unwanted by the corporate world. But on her desk sat a blank notebook. She opened it. On the first page, she wrote, "What I did was wrong. This is the start of learning how to never be that person again." It wasn't much. But for the first time in weeks, her hands didn't shake when she picked up the pen. Meanwhile, Olivia walked the top floor of her new center, stopping by a wall etched with names, not of investors or donors, but of the interns and entry-level employees who were the first to speak up during the Brightwell scandal. "I didn't forget you," she whispered. From the rooftop, the city stretched endlessly beneath her, glittering with possibility. She had been dragged out of a lobby like she didn't matter. Now, her name adorned the skyline, and her mission was just beginning. A year had passed since Brightwell Enterprises collapsed in what came to be known as the silent complicity scandal. What began as a single, routine visit by a woman in a cashmere sweater had become one of the most referenced corporate case studies in business schools, DEI training seminars, and even Senate hearings. But for Olivia Harris, the past 12 months weren't about headlines. They were about building. Today, the Harris Innovation Center was fully operational and thriving. Over 1,200 employees worked across 5 floors. Half of them were young talents from underserved communities. The other half? Veterans of the tech world who'd walked away from toxic corporate culture to work in a place where merit, not ego, ruled. Inside the bright central atrium, a massive digital screen played a montage. Interns presenting new code at conferences. A teen from the Bronx winning a national AI challenge. Olivia herself standing alongside 2 new black female CEOs she had mentored and funded personally. Her quiet revolution had already changed more lives than Brightwell ever did. But across town, things looked very different for those left behind. Jonathan Reed now lived in a small town upstate, removed from the world he once ruled. His name was still on business blacklists. No invitations came. No offers. Just silence. He occasionally opened LinkedIn and read articles about Harris Innovation's rise. He'd thought of reaching out to Olivia, an apology, maybe. But he didn't deserve a response. Not after what he let happen. Instead, he journaled each morning, trying to write down what he wished he had said that day in the lobby. Sometimes, that's all you have left, what you should have said. As for Rachel Bennett, she'd taken a different path. She spent the year volunteering at a women's shelter, answering phones. It paid almost nothing, but it offered something she'd never had before, perspective. The humiliation, the public downfall, the job rejections, all of it had stripped away her layers of vanity and left behind a woman who finally listened. Who saw people. She didn't pretend to be a martyr or a victim. She accepted that she had been both the cause and the cautionary tale. One afternoon, during a break, she opened her cracked tablet and watched Olivia give a TED Talk titled, "The Cost of Dismissing People." She cried again. But this time, not out of fear, out of understanding. She didn't know if she'd ever be forgiven, but she knew she was no longer that woman at the front desk. Back at the Harris Center, Olivia stood with her newest interns as they prepped a demo for visiting investors. One of them, a young woman in sneakers and a hoodie, fidgeted nervously with her note cards. "I've never pitched anything," she admitted, avoiding eye contact. Olivia crouched beside her. "They'll listen," she said with a soft smile. "And if they don't, you keep talking anyway. Your worth isn't up for their vote." Those words, simple but powerful, had carried Olivia through boardrooms, betrayals, and broken deals. And now, they passed to the next generation. Later that afternoon, Olivia took the elevator to the rooftop garden. The breeze was soft. The skyline shimmered. In the far distance stood the husk of what once was Brightwell's HQ, now completely gutted, bought at auction by a housing development firm. Where a monument to silence once stood, low-income apartments would rise. A fitting transformation. As Olivia stood in the light, Marla approached with a folder. "You've been invited to the United Nations," she said, eyes bright. "They want you to speak on systemic bias and ethical leadership." Olivia chuckled. "I'm flattered, but I'd rather stay here. We've got 500 new applications to review." Marla paused, then asked gently, "Do you ever think about that day?" Olivia didn't need to ask which one. "Yes," she said. "But not with anger. With purpose." She looked out across the city. "They tried to write me off because I didn't fit their picture of power. I gave them a new picture to live with." At True Echo, we believe stories like Olivia Harris's are more than just moments, they are movements. Olivia didn't seek revenge, she delivered consequences. And in doing so, she exposed a hard truth. Prejudice may speak the loudest, but silence is always the most dangerous voice in the room. So ask yourself, when the moment comes, will you be Rachel? Will you be Jonathan? Or will you be the one who builds something better? If Olivia's journey moved you, share this story. Leave a comment below. What would you have done if you witnessed what she endured? Subscribe for more powerful, real-life inspired stories that speak truth and spark change. Thank you for watching.